Welcome and thank you for joining the question and answer portion of today's tutorial. My name is Margaret Merkley and I'm going to be one of the moderators tonight. I'm chair of the program committee and also president of the Ontario Guild of English Handbell Ringers.
Hello, my name's Rob Cairns and I'm going to be the other moderator this evening, and I am the vice president of OGEHR.
Today's tutorial on how to mark your score efficiently was produced by Lisa Kyriakides. And in addition to this tutorial, Lisa has already produced two. First one was getting started with a new piece of music, and the second one was on conducting the basics. And I really think I was saying to Lisa earlier that this particular tutorial is a really nice companion one to getting started with a new piece of music. Look out for Lisa's future tutorials that include how to recover from a train wreck, choosing music for ensembles, and finding the melody in your score. And I was thinking that choosing music for your ensembles is maybe an important one for us to be listening to during COVID when we have fewer people that can actually practice. We thank Lisa very, very much for sharing your time and your expertise with us and by producing all of these videos. We know that it takes a tremendous amount of time and effort, and we really appreciate it, Lisa.
Lisa enjoys a busy and varied career as a conductor, a clinician, a performer, and a musical director. She directs 2 3-octave choirs at Aurora United Church, as well as performs in the church's quintet, EmBellished. And Lisa is also a member of the Bronze Foundation and is currently the Central Area Rep for OGEHR. Most recently, Lisa was elected as the secretary of the newly formed Handbell Musicians of Canada. That's pretty incredible.
So please feel free to put any questions that you might have in the chat box. But in the meantime, Lisa, what can I do to prepare my score outside of rehearsal time?
Good question, Mark. So hopefully your director will let you take the music home. If not, then you're a little out of luck. But if they do, if you share a stand with somebody, maybe you can negotiate who gets the music at what point. But a lot of the things I talked about in the tutorial, you can mark in advance. Things like page turns, dynamic markings that are far away, markings of handbell techniques that are far away, and certainly your setup at the beginning. You can have a really good look at what notes you play, and when you have to change things. And that's when you can really delve deep into your score and figure out, when do I have to pick things up? When do I have to put things down? And to do all those things in advance of having to play in the middle of rehearsal is really, really helpful.
This isn't a question, but Lloyd has an interesting point in the chat, and that's about the differences in pencils. In your tutorial, you actually said we use pencils. We obviously don't want to be marking in pen because that can't be taken away, but maybe the difference between a hard and a soft pencil, also, you know, being able to actually erase all of those markings for future use. Maybe you have a comment about pencils.
Yeah, we haven't really delved into that in my group. We just sort of, Pat organizes our pencils for us. There's probably a lot of advantage in having a softer lead pencil. There's a fine line though. You have to be able to read it at top speed and be able to, process the information. So it can't be so light that you can't process the information fast enough. So if you're going to err on any side, I would err on the maybe slightly harder to erase one. I've gotten lots of scores, like in Bronze Foundation, we get 10, 12 scores or whatever. And I always have to go through and erase the previous person's marks. And I've never had any problem. Sometimes you can barely see it, but really when you're reading your music super fast, you're not going to concern yourself with little markings that you can hardly see. You're only really going to look at the things that you can see. So. But it's something to think about for sure.
Thank you, Lisa. Billy has a question, and it may address ringers that have to share music, but it may address what you were just saying when you get another person's old piece of music. How do you ignore markings from other people? As you mentioned in your tutorial, some people are novel writers. And if you're sharing a piece of music, how do you ignore the other person's mark?
Well, that's a hard one, particularly when you share a score with somebody. I would encourage your partner to not be a novel writer. I mean, that's the whole point of my tutorial. It's got to be short and sweet. In fact, you should really almost never have to write a word, like an actual English word on the paper. So you need to encourage them to be brief. Things that are long are useless, absolutely useless. You do not have to, unless you don't play for 2 pages and you have time to read that sentence you wrote on the top of the page. Otherwise, they're pretty useless. So I would encourage your partner, Stan, to write things briefly. If that doesn't go over well, make sure that their markings, if they're the top, if you've got 2 positions and they're the top position, make sure they're writing their markings above the staff, and make sure you're writing your markings below the staff, so you can kind of take your eye and sort of ignore what's happening on the top of the staff and just pay attention to what's happening on the bottom.
We have an interesting kind of follow-up on that, again from Lloyd in the chat, and it's also something which I thought about earlier when I was watching, and that's about color coding. I know that there was a time when I was singing a lot of Messiah concerts, and sometimes it would be up to 6 or 7 in the Christmas season with varying conductors. And in my Messiah score, I would put different markings for the different conductors in different colors. In bell playing, if you're sharing, if your 2 players each have a different color, does that help or does that hurt?
This is a hard one for me because fundamentally I don't believe in color coding music. I think for me, because it comes from where people have used colors to circle the notes for their ringers. A conductor has gone through the score in advance and circled all the notes for the ringers, and one ringer is in green and one ringer is in blue or something. And I think that's a crutch, and I would encourage people not to do that. Now, the case that you're giving where you had 7 messiahs, good gracious, 7 messiahs. I mean, I get why you would need to do it in color. I personally think that we don't need to do it in color. If we mark our scores, like your case is different, that Messiah case is something totally different, and that would be a one-off that I've never even experienced something like that. But if it's just a score that you're just sharing with a partner, stand, I still think pencil is the best. I do have a ringer who insists on writing with a red pencil, but it's an erasable red pencil. And she writes way too much in the score and drives the other partner, Stand, absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I can see what you mean. Like if people are actually circling notes, that definitely becomes problematic. And I like the way you had said that one player does it above the staff and one below. And I personally, I can see that if those were the types of markings that were in color, that would help. But anything in the score, I can see it would definitely be problematic.
You just have to make sure it can be erased. Whatever you use, it has to be erasable, because what you write is not necessarily what the next person who plays that score needs.
Yeah.
Or like in the case of, for example, I've got 8 ringers, including myself, doing this project, the Handbell project that OGEHR is doing. Well, nobody's sharing a score. So people have scores that are not actually originally their part, right? Because we share music, but I had 8 scores and 8 of us. So people have, and so the position 8 ringer might have the position 3-4 score. So yeah, they need to be able to erase.
Lisa, I'm sure you have done lots of reading around this topic, but are there resources that you would recommend a ringer to look at and go over?
So That's a good question, because the answer I found is no. In preparing for this tutorial, I looked. Now, I'm sure I didn't do an exhaustive look, but certainly in the resources that I own and the things I could find on the internet, I really couldn't find anyone who was willing to really commit to a way to mark everything on Handbell score. Some things were universal, like marking four in hand and Shelley pick up and drop off of bells. Obviously all the Handbell techniques and stuff, but some of the things I was talking about, page turns and putting all the stuff at the top of your score, none of that I could find anywhere. So a lot of this is just based on my experience as a musician, and not just a Handbell musician. I'm originally a trained vocalist, and so Rob and I, we were in this choir where, the first rehearsal, you had like 35 pieces to sight read. So you had to be able to write shorthand. So if the conductor conducted a breath mark somewhere, for me, it's just a slash. That's it. That means breathe. No writing the word breathe. There's no time for that. So yeah, I just and everybody's going to develop a lot of their own things, a lot of their own systems that work for them. I think the cardinal rule is brevity.
Interesting.
One of the things that I saw in your video, which I don't personally do, which I hadn't thought about and I loved, and that was drawing your setup. It's something that I'm definitely going to suggest to my ringers. I've got a couple of bass ringers who are always shifting around their bells. So I think that's something which they would really find useful. So my question is that something you picked up from somewhere, or is that one of your ideas?
Oh, I don't think I can take credit for that. I have no idea where I got it from, just probably, experience. Certainly being in bronze foundation, when you have 9 or 10 pieces and, you have to do them fast. But even if you've only got one piece and you have 4 bells, let's say 2 chimes, some mallets, you need to write down what you're going to use, in what order you're going to use it. And something I didn't cover in the tutorial, just because couldn't cover everything, was, so let's say you had 4 bells, but maybe one of those bells you have because there's a key change in the piece, and the key change happens halfway through. So let's say you go from an F5 to an F sharp 5. Well, you don't need to have that F5 in the line of bells at the beginning. That F sharp 5 can be a little bit higher up so that you don't pick it up, right? And so when I draw my picture at the beginning, I actually I would put F5 and then I would write F sharp 5 higher to know that it actually has to sit on the table higher. And then I would also write where my mallets are. So am I putting a mallet in each hand? Do they go on either side of the bells? Are they, because sometimes the mallets have to go, between the bells and the chimes or somewhere. So I actually draw where the mallets go. And I was having this conversation with Manyi the other day. She actually draws like a mallet, like she draws a stick with a circle on top of it. I just put M for mallets. But, and then where do you put your chimes? Because there's nothing worse than getting to that chime section and having the chime somewhere that's the wrong hand for you. So really putting everything on the table you need and then figuring it out. And that's where your pencil's really handy, because sometimes I go through a piece, I figure it all out, I'm at home, I've got it all done, I think, oh great, I've got it all set up, this is how I'm going to set it up, and then I actually go and play it in a rehearsal and realize, that doesn't work. I've got to move this bell over to here because I need to pick it up with the opposite hand. And so really important. And if you play more than one piece in a row, then I don't know how you don't do it, because you need to know as soon as you turn that first page, you need to know, what do I need and where does it go on the table? Because we don't want to be in that situation, right? In the middle of a performance. Oh, I needed mallets. Oh dear. Too late now.
Sounds like an excellent practice. Lisa, it sort of sounds like you have developed bell shorthand. And it's great for your ringers, but what about I come in as a substitute? am I going to be readily able to understand what do you do for substitute ringers that come in to understand this bell shorthand?
Well, I mean, you hope that your ringers are writing their shorthand in a way that makes sense. If they need to put down a bell, either, and we've talked about in my ringers, where you put the line from the one bell down and you put a T for table, or even just put the line down. Sometimes I don't even put a T. I just know that if I put the line down, it means I've got to drop that bell and I put the bell that I need to pick up. Mm-hmm. So you hope that the notations are sort of logical and sensical enough that people will get them, like LH for left hand and RH for right hand and things like that, or, chime, A flat CH or something that they need to pick up. And I think substitutes will pick up that notation pretty fast, especially in a rehearsal when they've had a chance to maybe go over it a couple of times. Because what happens sometimes is I still have people, I've got some of my ringers right here, but not these two, but some of my ringers who still don't want to mark things. Like, I don't know why, because I'm obviously a big proponent of marking your score. And it really hinders the person who comes in to substitute for them. And then sometimes somebody will come in to substitute for a ringer and they'll be like, oh, these markings are so good. I've been in that situation where one of my ringers might be absent and I have to go. So I go and stand in their position sometimes and ring. And I'm like, oh, these are great. Like, I know exactly, I've got to put this D down in order to pick up the D sharp. This is fantastic. So.
Your point about being brief with your markings is really important there, because if it's a long note and it's a substitute, they're not even going to have a chance to read that when they're playing. One of the other things that you kind of alluded to earlier in this discussion was stuff between pieces if you're in a concert. We've talked a lot about markings at the beginning of pieces, but what about markings at the end of the pieces for sequences of pieces?
Yeah. So it kind of depends on how you work. If you are in a concert and you play 2 consecutive pieces and you stay in exactly the same position, you don't move. I don't know if you need to put too much at the end of the piece you just finished. I think you just flip the page to the new piece. Where I think it's really handy, though, is if you go to a different position. So Pat's shaking her head because she knows we're in the same quintet together and we change positions all the time. And if we play 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces in succession, by the time you get to the 5th piece, you don't even remember where you were in the next piece. So we always put the number. So, Lisa goes to 1 or whatever. And then the other thing that we do, and this can be useful too, even if you don't change position, if bells have to move. So if you get to the end of one piece and in the next piece you've reassigned the F sharp 6 to somebody farther down in the choir because it's just easier for them to play, and the position, 9 player couldn't play it. If you put at the end of the piece you just played, past the F sharp 6 down, that can be done before you even flip the page to the new piece. And in the quintet, what we do sometimes is, it'll tell me to move to position 1, and it'll tell me to take a bell with me when I go, or take 2 bells with me when I go. So I think there are definitely things that you can put at the end of a piece that will help you set up for the next piece more efficiently.
Thank you, Lisa. I think that question and that answer about the ending of pieces is perhaps a good way to end our formal session on the Q&A tonight. And we will move forward into the less formal.
We have had a fantastic full season with our handbell tutorials, and we're going to take a little bit of a Christmas break now. But we hope that you will join us on Sunday, January the 10th for the next OGEHR handbell tutorial, and Dominique Moreau will be presenting a tutorial on how to use a metronome, your best friend when you are practicing. We hope and encourage all of you and your OGEHR friends to join us for both the video and the subsequent Q&A.
So on behalf of the Ontario Guild of English Handbell Ringers, I would like to thank Lisa in particular for creating the video and hosting this Q&A session. But thanks to all of you for joining the Q&A session and making it possible.